81 million years ago, a time when the western interior seaway splits North America more than ever. Even with far less space to work with, dinosaurs are still thriving on land. And in the area that will one day be Utah, there are signs that a great chase has recently unfolded. Hundreds of footprints have been left in the earth by a herd of dinosaurs that fled this area some time ago. The herd is long gone, but not far from where the stampede began. One member is lagging behind, but not of his own choice. Standing defiantly under the hot sun is a young male Diabloceratops, a 4.5 meter long, 1.2 ton Ceratopsian. He has gotten separated from his herd after they were attacked by a predator, and upon the predator targeting him, the male turned and faced the opponent head-on, using his horns and impressive head crest to fend off the attacker. At first it seemed he chased off the carnivore, and so he ran to try and catch up with his herd. But the predator had attacked him again, forcing the Diabloceratops to defend himself, driving the carnivore off a second time before turning to run to his family, which once again the predator then swooped in and attacked. The young male fought off the attacker a third time, and now waited impatiently as the scorching sun beamed down on him. He had multiple wounds on his back and rear right leg, but he was still in fighting shape, though it appeared his opponent was trying to wear him down bit by bit. His best chance of escape was to find his herd, but he could tell they were still a fair bit away. He turned his head back and forth looking for any threat, but couldn't see anything in the more open areas or amongst the dense foliage. With blood still seeping from his freshest wounds, the Diabloceratops turned around again and followed the smell of his family. Breaking into a sprint, the need to regroup stronger than his willingness to stand his ground. The Ceratopsian may have weighed over a ton, but he was quite fast, the sound of his quickened breaths drowning out his footfalls. But as he ran, came the familiar sound of theropod feet closing in fast. The male glanced back to see the same tall figure that had been harassing him this whole time was almost on top of him. He swerved and threw his head to the right, trying to slam his pursuer aside, but the predator stayed on his rear, and as the Ceratopsian swung and missed, the Tyrannosaur bit down once again into the Diabloceratops's rear, its serrated teeth cutting cleanly through his hide. That was all he got, however, as right after the young Diabloceratops completed his rotation and came face to face with his attacker for the fourth time. The carnivore was a Lythronax, an 8-meter strongly built hunter evolved to take down medium herbivores. The two dinosaurs stared each other down, the Lythronax hissing sharply, while the Diabloceratops bellowed and shook his head, waving the twin horns atop of his crest in wide arcs. The carnivore was taller and longer than the herbivore, but they weighed about the same. Both were equipped with deadly weapons. Both were evolved to kill the other. Now they started pacing in a slow circle, as each one waited to see what the other would do next. The Diabloceratops had many wounds now, but he had managed to puncture the Lythronax's legs with his horns in previous bouts, slightly hindering the carnivore that relied on being fast and agile. It appeared the predator was done with his hit-and-run tactics, but the Diabloceratops was still in fighting shape, and held the advantage as long as he kept the carnivore in front of him. Eventually the two stopped pacing, and squared up. Both had had enough of running now. The Lythronax moved forward, opening his mouth, ready to jinx to the side and get around the Diabloceratops and bite into his front leg. His target waited, and as the hunter made his move, the Diabloceratops turned his head sideways, angling his shield-like frill down, and by more luck than skill, caught the Lythronax's head in between his top two horns. The carnivore was stunned, and for a few moments, the only part of him that moved were his eyes, which darted back and forth in shock. The Diabloceratops, however, seized the moment, twisting his head till it stood as straight as possible, and then pushed forward. The Lythronax tried to correct his footing, but the Ceratopsian was in control, and as he marched forward with the carnivore still stuck between his horns, his pace increased. Soon the herbivore was almost jogging despite the heavy load he was carrying. Then he threw his head forward and launched the predator away from him. The Lythronax didn't go far, but flailed as he fell, hitting the ground hard and rolling over himself, his legs kicking in frustration. Eventually, the carnivore's roll ended, and he awkwardly rose to his feet. But the Diabloceratops was gone. It had started running again, preferring to get away from the threat, then continue to fight. The Lythronax was dizzy, hot, and confused from his ordeal, and considered beginning the chase anew, but from the sound of it, the Diabloceratops' herd was closing in. Perhaps for now, he would simply ignore his hunger. The Diabloceratops himself called out as he smelled how close his herd was. He ran as fast as he could, and soon the familiar horned frills of the other Diabloceratops appeared out of the forest. He regrouped with his family, falling behind a trio of fully grown males. Safe. Once again. Hello fellow travellers and welcome back. Today we will be breaking down the devil-faced Ceratopsian, Diabloceratops. The first and only fossil of Diabloceratops was discovered in 2002 in the Last Chance Creek member of the Waweep Formation in Utah, and consisted of a partially weathered skull. In 2010 it would be named Diabloceratops ettoni, the species name being after paleontologist Jeffrey Etton. The genus name comes from Diablo, the Spanish word for devil, and Ceratops being Latin for horned face, clearly taking inspiration from the long curved horns on top of its neck frill. Diabloceratops was a Ceratopsian in the Centrosaurian subfamily, those that usually have smaller nose horns and larger frills. It lived in the late Cretaceous 81 million years ago. So we only have one skull for Diabloceratops, also including a piece of the bottom jaw, and the left side of the skull had been weathered before its discovery. But fortunately the right side was well preserved, which means one only has to mirror the right side and you get a good idea of what the animal's skull looked like. Based on this, Diabloceratops is estimated to have been medium-sized for a Ceratopsian, being about 4.5 meters in length, stood 1.2 meters tall at the hip, with the top horns being around 1.8 meters high, and weighing around 1.4 tons. It is a typical Ceratopsian skull, with a tall neck frill that has multiple notches running up the sides of it that ended in twin curved horns at the top, along with two holes or fenestra to reduce the frill's weight that would have been covered in skin and muscle. It has short, upward curved horns over the eyes, and though you probably missed it, Diabloceratops also has a small nose horn, and may have had a second smaller horn in front of that. The jaws consist of a strong beak at the front for snipping flora, and grinding teeth in the back for breaking down its food before swallowing. Interestingly, it has the deepest and shortest skull of any Centrosaurian. We don't have any postcranial remains for Diabloceratops, so it is usually reconstructed as having a similar build to its close relatives. Diabloceratops is one of the oldest centrosaurs, having some traits held over from its more basal Protoceratopsid ancestors, as Diabloceratops still has an extra opening in the skull that all later species would lose or become much reduced. So it's possible Diabloceratops retained other traits, such as a larger, longer tail, or if you want to get really out there, maybe had been partially bipedal? Just a theory. That's the main facts we know about Diabloceratops, so let's take a look at the environment it lived in. As said in the narrative section, 81 million years ago the Western Interior Seaway was at its widest extent, so much of North America was a vast inland sea. The area that Diabloceratops lived in is thought to have been a wet, seasonal climate, dominated by rivers, lakes, and floodplains, surrounded by forests. Diabloceratops shared its environment with other dinosaurs, including Acrostavis, a hadrosaur, Adelelopus, a lambeosaur, Lythronax, a tyrannosaur, and a whole lot of unnamed species that include families such as the nodosaurs, pachycephalosaurs, ornithomimosaurs, and so on, plus multiple small mammal species from multituberculates to marsupials and placental mammals. Of course, the freshwater deposits have a much better fossil record, and include sharks, rays, lungfish, bowfish, turtles, and crocodiles. Probably the most interesting discovery made at this formation is one that preserved possible predation. Two burrows likely excavated by small mammals have grooves in them that seem to have been made by some sort of maniraptoran dinosaur, likely a dromaeosaur or troodontid. Scientists believe, given the proximity of the grooves, it's highly likely that this was an attempt by the dinosaur to hunt the small mammals in the burrow. Not directly linked to Diabloceratops, but I would likely never get a chance to talk about it again, and it is a fascinating find. Diabloceratops lived during a time when Ceratopsians were becoming larger and more dominant in North America, and would soon play a major role in the continent's megafauna diversity, if they weren't already. It is a species that shot to fame in no small part because of its inspiring name, and spawned countless art pieces with satanic symbols and the like. I'm also told it made quite the impact when it was released on the Isle. Not that I play. Yes, there are dino nerds that don't play the Isle or Ark, we do exist. But what do you think of Diabloceratops? And for my question of the week, if you had to pick a dinosaur to be the face of your religious belief, which would you choose? I know I have a few creationalist viewers out there, so don't be shy. What lesser known dinosaur would you like me to do a breakdown on next? And until then, please like, share, subscribe, and thank you for watching.